Hip-hop.
Anonymous.
Saturdays.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sapo Saturdays. We got your boy ASAP Froggy, Doc Froggle Day, and we got Bingus Frog reporting live from his home in Burbank. We have a very special guest, Simon Horrocks.
Woohoo!
Welcome to the session, man.
Thank you, man.
Very, very happy to be here. Bingus, have you tuned in with us?
Tuned up and ready to go.
Awesome, man.
Is your mic
Welcome,
on?
welcome.
Are we hearing everybody's mic?
Everybody's here. Yeah, you know, Simon, I thought I'd do you a favor today. I wanted our guest today to feel, the best version of himself. So I figured if I wasn't the most attractive man in the room.
Yeah, I don't have a problem not being the most attractive man in the room. It happens all the time. I actually did a drum session last week for Keanu Reeves. So
Interesting.
yeah, that was pretty fun.
Oh, wow.
It was incredible. He's just the bass player in his band Dogstar, and my partner's producing it. So I ended up having to go help tune drums. Super cool guy. Walked in and was introduced himself, and I always find that's a great measure of how down to earth and cool a person is. They just don't assume you should know who they are.
Yeah, that's a
Well,
good
and
point.
it's so easy to say bad things about someone in the media, and you never hear anything bad about Keanu Reeves. Everyone speaks so highly of him and says that he's the kindest, most polite person there is.
Yeah, that was my experience, and it was pretty short. But from the experience that my partner's having, he's having the same feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you a question. I was looking at your Instagram page, and it lists musician, entrepreneur, father, brother, and partner. Is it in that order?
Probably dad first, probably father first, probably goofball should be on there, but I don't know. Is it politically correct to call yourself a goofball, or has that been canceled too?
No, I think that's one of the last remaining things you can still say. So
That's
I think
it.
you're okay.
That's kind of why I chose that. Yeah, I started as a musician. I did start as a musician, as a drummer, and from that, wanting to make sure that I could continue to play drums, I had to be entrepreneurial in just about every venture that I ever did. One of the things about playing drums is that, you have to collaborate with other musicians to make music. You can't just be, sit down and, tell a girl you want to play her a song and start pounding away, YYZ by Rush. She'll be like, that's awesome, dude. It's like...
Sweet.
Yeah. Oh, great. Cool. Do you have any earplugs?
Tell that to Charlie Parker. I bet he bagged some women.
Yeah.
You sent over what you would call a sloppy biography. Jesus, if that's a sloppy biography, I have to get my life together. You have done some extraordinary things, and I want to start right from the beginning. At the top of the biography, it basically says that you started in Detroit. Are you from Detroit originally?
Yeah, well, born in England, and then my family moved to Detroit when I was 5. My dad got a job kind of by happenstance. Where we lived in England, our neighbors had a son who owned a music store in Detroit, and my dad did some favors for them and offered him a job, and that basically we moved our whole family to America because of that. And I grew up in Detroit.
And I am from Detroit.
So funny
Right.
that you're actually from England, because when I heard your name first, I don't know why, but something very much from the Harry Potter realm.
Oh, totally.
Simon Horrocks.
Simon James Horrocks. Yeah. It's pretty British. I think my middle name would be either Graham or Nigel if it was any more British, right?
And I was sitting
Exactly.
here and I was like, Simon,
Ian.
how do you say your last name?
Horrocks
You
is
were like,
the
it's like Horrick, but
yeah.
the English way would be
Horrocks.
yes.
Yeah.
So Did you come from a musical family, or was music kind of your thing that deviated from what everyone else was doing?
Yeah, it happened completely by accident. My dad got this job at a music store, and I was one of those kids that said I wanted to do everything. Being the youngest, I was spoiled, and I would start something and then immediately quit it. And I went to the music store and saw the drums and said I wanted to play drums. And my mom and dad made a deal with me, and they said, look, if you're going to do this, you have to do it long enough to get to the point where, you know, you can quit on your own terms. I was like, I will love doing this. I will do it. And I immediately took one lesson and said, I want to quit. I'm like, this is hard. You know, like it doesn't, you don't just get to sit behind a drum set and play instantaneously. So I wanted to quit, and my parents reminded me that I had made this deal, and I stuck to it. And they're like, okay, we're going to give you a timer, and you're going to have to practice 30 minutes a day. So it was something that was difficult for me initially to have the discipline to do it. But once I got over a little bit of a hump, I ended up having an aptitude for it, and kind of went from there.
And then,
and that's so funny that they encouraged you to continue, not because it's great, you know, a bad thing to continue with an instrument, but maybe they would have, you know, tried to persuade you to do something else other than drums, because most people don't want to bring drums into their homes, you know, and parents
it's like stray dogs.
Oh my God, my kid's going to be banging on the set all day. And then they're not only encouraging you to stick with it, but they're like, yeah, you have to practice, you know, this amount of time every day. That's pretty special.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, in retrospect, my mom used to drive me to lessons, and I would forget to practice all week. And it's really funny because I would have this book that I would have to have studied the lessons, and I had the memory of a goldfish, so I would forget that I had a lesson in the next week and like go down and play along with, like, you know, whatever records, Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band and Ted Nugent, and, you know, all of these live records, and learn how to play along with that stuff, and then realize I had a lesson. So my mom would be like, cool, we got to go. I'm like, where? To your drum lesson. Oh, shit. So I would sit in the passenger seat of my mom's car and read the music and kind of teach myself the music without actually moving my hands or playing it on the way to the lesson in order to prep. But what ended up happening is that ended up developing into a skill of sight reading.
Yeah.
So there's one of the things that you do as a musician, especially if you're a session musician, is you walk into the room, they put the music down, and you've got to kind of nail it. So, you know, inadvertently, I was like preparing to do that just accidentally because I was lazy.
Yeah. So like, the
being
rule
lazy
of lazy,
paid
yeah,
off.
being lazy pays off. Like the rule of laziness is not a box that we all can live in.
No, lean in.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit of controlled laziness, because he did do the work in the car. So there was that determination.
Action of work.
Yes, the determination was there. It was just like, I'm going to do it at the very last second.
Yeah. That's 100% true. It's like me having that oh shit moment, I've got to do this, was so that I wouldn't feel completely embarrassed and humiliated by having my teacher look at me going, you have no clue what you're doing, do you?
Right.
I couldn't do that in any other topic ever or anything in school, only music.
So at that point, did you kind of realize you had that talent?
I didn't really realize until I had a talent until, it's really weird. I ended up, I was in a junior high and I was playing music, and there were these competitions in Michigan. One of the great things about Michigan is they have this Michigan School Band and Orchestra Association, the MSBOA.
Yeah.
And they put on these competitions, and the music education in Michigan is incredible.
Yeah.
And I'm really a product of that program, that whoever set it up and however they did it, it was saved my life, you know. And I went to do this competition for my junior high, and it was part of, I think it was the classical, I was doing like a concert band thing, and part of that was this sight reading. So you go and you have three pieces that you perform as the orchestra or concert band. Orchestras has violins, concert band doesn't have strings. So concert band play three songs, two of them are required so that they can kind of measure you against other bands, not just kind of like, okay, that's wildly different than this, like, you know, so you can have compare A to B and, that kind of stuff. And then you also sight read, which is when you're done performing your pieces, you go into this room, the conductor stands there, you have like a manila envelope on your music stand, and then they go, okay, time. And then you get to pull it out, and you can look at the music for 2 minutes. Then you get another 2 minutes to have the band director say, hey, watch out for section B, section C, all of that stuff. And you can't touch your instrument. You can, like, if you're a wind player, you can't put the instrument to your mouth. You have to just, like, do the fingering positions. And then he goes, okay. They go, time. And then the conductor has to start, and you have to perform the piece. And however you do is however you do.
That is
Holy shit.
Yeah, and so I did one of those, and one of the guys that was an adjudicator for the concert band was a guy that was the high school that I was going to. He was the band director. And we came out, and he's like, that was a pretty difficult piece. And I was like, nah, it was kind of easy. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, I didn't find it that difficult at all. And turns out that the guy who was the drummer, who was the main drummer in the high school that I was going to, had this battle of wills with that guy. So it was kind of like you had to show up to every performance, and if you didn't show up to the performance, you were out. And this guy wanted to go see a concert, and he was, he tested the wills of the band director. And he was a great drummer. He was much better than I was. And he said, okay, you're out. And he called me, and I started playing high school. I was in the high school band while I was still in junior high.
Wow.
So they brought me up from basically like the minor leagues, and then they just threw me in the deep end of the pool. They threw this chart at me that was this Stan Kenton chart called Chiapas that was just bananas. It's like in all these odd time signatures. It's like if Rush had a piece of jazz music. I mean, it's like crazy time signatures and like all of this like madness. It's an incredible piece of music. I remember seeing it, and I was like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
And I was in so far over my head. And I remember I came home from school, and credit to my mom, I was like, what am I going to do? And she's like, well, Stan Kenton, he's a big jazz artist. He has to have albums, right? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, well, let's go to the music store and see if we can find a recording of this song and you can hear it. And I was like, okay.
good idea, Mom.
Yeah. And I came home, and I had the music, and I jammed to the record just like I did. And the next day I came back and nailed it to the back of the wall. And they were
Awesome,
like,
man. That
okay,
is
you're
awesome.
in. Yeah, it was.
Bro.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah.
So wait a minute. How old were you at this time, though?
I was 14.
Wow. That's awesome, man. That takes some incredible skill and talent to be able to do at such a young age, and it's crazy how you just naturally sort of develop the skill sets to do so as well.
Yeah, and then from there, I mean, because he knew he had to have me in his program for the next 3 years, he threw me into a community college jazz program. There was this and the musicians that came out of it are incredible. This guy, Matt Bezanet, Greg Bizanet, like these, Richard Margitza, who is like played with Miles Davis. Like Greg Bizanet plays with Ringo Starr, and he's like one of the most amazing drummers. There was like 6 drummers. He was the first one. I was like literally the last one. But it was just a way for me to, I ended up having college credits before I went into high school.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it was like bizarre. I'm like, I had no clue what I was doing. I was in way over my head.
So that was like you like being lazy, driving in the car, looking at your sheet music on the way, and then all of a sudden you got college credits before you go to college.
Kinda, yeah. I did. I ended up, I think before I went to college, I had 45 credits.
That's
Holy
pretty amazing.
shit.
Man.
Yeah, because they all counted. And then when I went to college, I had, 3 years of 15 credits
Got
a
my
year.
associate's degree already. What you know about that?
I mean, I think my ACT score was like 18, but I think I was high taking my ACT, but I couldn't spell, but I could play music. I was like literally the musical equivalent of a dumb jock.
Yeah, man, that's pretty amazing, and you're quite established now, and that's why you and I met.
Yeah.
Was at your amazing studio in East Hollywood, California.
Which was awesome, by the way. I'm so thankful you were able to come out and do that. I'm glad we met. Thanks,
I'm
man.
very glad I met, too. Like I told you that day, I was like, I'm very glad I met you today. I think there's a lot of aligned things from growing up in Michigan, being out there, having a passion for music. Here we are, man.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing.
We are.
Got to say yes to opportunities.
But-
man.
Yes, absolutely. Bingus.
But let's not fast forward too much because we'll get to GoldDiggers. But we're back in Detroit, right? So we go from Detroit to Chicago to go to Columbia College for Arts, Entertainment, and Media Management. What was kind of your goal for that program? Because it sounds like you were leaning into being more of a musician. So was that a program that would facilitate that, or did you have another idea?
So when I was going to school in Detroit, I went to Wayne State, and I was, like I said, I was the musical equivalent of a dumb jock. I mean, I got in on academic probation. They paid me to go to school to play drums there. I was in a big band. I met the guy who played guitar in the big band was this guy, Dave Besser, and he was a super smart guy, really entrepreneurial, lived up in Bloomfield Hills, lived off at Telegraph Road and Telegraph and 15, like back in that neighborhood. And his dad was a pediatric surgeon, and he wanted to build a studio. And Dave was an incredible musician, a really smart guy, really business-minded, set up a business, built a recording studio in the basement of his house. And the only thing he couldn't do was play drums. And so my dad, because he was in the music business, helping get the gear. So I instantly became partners with this guy. Plus, he had really great weed, and we were total stoners, and we just smoked pot all the time. I mean, I made the drive from Dearborn to up Telegraph Road to Bloomfield Hills to get high, only without doing anything else. Probably 4 times a week.
Just smash on some drums, man. There you go.
Maybe my drums were there, maybe they weren't.
So the weed must have been good.
It was always great, yeah. Bloomfield Hills, you got the best weed. You got like green pot when everybody else in Detroit had like brown weed or that kind of shit. Swag, or the interesting thing about growing up in that time with weed is you could get Acapulco Gold, and you could get Panama Red, and you could get Thai Stick that were, exotic blends of weed and, sexy Mexi. But, the only green pot that you ever saw was from Hawaii.
Oh, wow.
It was like coming in.
The Maui Wowie.
The Maui Wowie. That was it, man.
I want to go to Hawaii.
It used to come in tennis ball cans.
That's awesome.
That's how they used to ship it over. I don't know whatever. But,
you guys hearing that? We up the game now, though.
So this is the History of Weed podcast too. And so one day Dave said, "Well, my dad, who was a pediatric surgeon, got a gig as a pediatric cardiologist at University of Chicago," and he's like, "I'm moving to Chicago," and I was like, "Oh. You are? Okay." And he's like, "Well, do you want to come and move with my family?"
Are you taking?
What's that?
Are you taking the weed with you?
No, yeah, that was omnipresent, man. But so he invited me to move in with his family, and so we had this apartment, this massive. It was a condo in Hyde Park, which is at 55th and South Shore Drive. And he found this program that had essentially one of the first music business programs. And the guy who ran it was this guy, Erwin Steinberg, who founded Mercury Records. And Erwin would fly in from New York. Like, he's the guy that basically signed Barbra Streisand and Bon Jovi and Rush and John Mellencamp. Like, all of these huge artists. Barbra Streisand was one of the first, but he also hired Quincy Jones as an executive. And at that time, I think Quincy Jones was the first black executive vice president in any company in America.
Wow.
Which I didn't know, but yeah, he taught the class, and I learned so much from that program because essentially it was the business of music. And my philosophy at that time was, and that kind of spurred my growth in the business was I was a musician, I was a player, I could play drums, I could do gigs, I was gigging a lot, I could play in the studio, but I wasn't writing songs. I didn't understand what publishing was. I didn't understand that, I was skilled labor, and if I wanted to, actually, have some passive streams of revenue, that I would need to create some intellectual property. And so it taught me a lot about the music business, and I use almost all of what I learned in that program today.
Wow. It's weird. It's almost like you just fell into every situation. Like you just tripped into this thing, and then that was and then you rolled, and there's a hole over here, and then you rolled into the hole, which then did a loop-de-loop to this. You know what I mean? It's totally crazy. I love it, man.
Well, we're on the journey. Man.
The crazy thing is that the guy, in that program, there was this thing called AMP Records, and part of it was you got to go find an artist, and you sign the artist to a deal. And you make an album with that artist. It was a 12-inch. At that time, 12-inch singles were big. And so you do a 12-inch single. And I found this band because I was working in a music store. And I heard this record and taught this class on how to record music. And this band took the class. It was 2 guys. The band was called the Glory Hounds. And we put that record out in college when I was 21. And the guy that was in the band is my business partner at GoldDiggers.
Oh, yes. Wow. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so then the whole did the loop-de-loop, and then...
That's what...
Dude, that's insane.
Yeah, it's insane. When I came back to L.A., I still had that relationship with him. And I guess I must have been a brilliant teacher because he went in to be a huge producer. I did shit producing, but he became...
Showed him how.
Right, yeah. And I did it all wrong. I was just totally faking my way through all of it. But he ended up producing Wilco and My Morning Jacket. Wow. And the last thing he did is Soft Kill. He's the guy...
I love Wilco and My Morning Jacket. I grew up listening to them.
Yeah. It's so funny. He ended up getting a record deal, and I went one way, he went the other way, and then when I moved to L.A., we connected again, and, I just maintained those relationships, and we were able to build GoldDiggers.
Bro, let's get into some of this. I'm going to reset the room really quick, though, because we didn't even set it at the top. So what's up, everybody? It's Sapo Studios. You got Doc Froggle-Day, a.k.a. A-Bomb. Bingus is over here at his house. He's just chilling in Burbank, recording live from there. We got, ASAP, a.k.a. Shia Papoose. We're here with our boy Simon. That's just throwing down.
What a cool nickname.
This wild... Oh, man.
We'll give you a nickname.
So many... But yeah, we're pretty much under, just helping out artists figure out their story through Web3 and their journey, as well as, just how they got to the point that they're at. We're trying to put power back in the hands of the artists and give them the ability to essentially mint their music and do a whole lot more on the marketplace that we have being built within maybe the next year or so. We're working on all that, TBD. But from here on out, we're just chilling with musicians, talking about their life journey and their stories, and getting the goods from them, learning whose sauce is what, as the Avant-Gardians told us, the sauce. That's something that I think Bingus can get into you with, actually, is sort of like what your sauce is. So I'm going to throw it back to Bingus. Hopefully he doesn't get rugged, and we'll go from here.
Yeah, I from Wi-Fi to my provider, so hopefully now that I've ditched Spectrum, we're good. Can you hear me?
You just shouted him out, bro. You don't want to give him a plug.
No. I want to particularly say fuck Spectrum.
Right.
So
okay.
I want to make sure to shout them out.
You're on the spectrum.
Yeah. All right. So let's get back in. So we're in Chicago.
Yep.
And you're selling tracks to Larry Sherman.
Yeah.
And it's house music. And that.
Yeah, right at that time, you never know when you're in it, only in retrospect, right? But that was Chicago house music was going on. There was a whole industrial music scene that was going on. So, Front 242, Wax Tracks was this record store, and these guys were just a bunch of punk rockers, and they just, house music the joke was you make it in your house, sell it out the trunk, that was kind of what you did. And there was this guy named Larry Sherman who had Trax Records, and you'd go to his place and he looked like Jabba the Hutt and had spaghetti stains on his shirt, And it was like in a loft, and you'd give him your music and like cassettes, and he'd play the cassette, and he'd be like, I'll buy that one, and then reach in his pocket and give you a couple $1,000 in cash, and you never saw a royalty check ever again. You pressed it onto vinyl, made up a name for it, and then sold it overseas. And
Wow.
So there's a lot of deals that happen that way. I wasn't successful at that, but I had found this artist named Steve Armani who had a 12-inch that was out in Europe, and it was a cool hit. It was like a kind of a club hit. It was called "Don't Say It's Over." If you go on YouTube, you can find somebody spinning it. Steve Armani, "Don't Say It's Over" was the record, and there's probably like let's see, you're looking at that. That's it right there. So
We're going to listen to this.
yeah, so Steve-O needed to put a live band together for some shows. I have no idea how I ended up being in the band, honestly, but I ended up being in the band.
You fell into that
Yeah,
one.
I totally fell into it.
part of the
Yep,
loop-de-loop.
I swear to God, man. I was like, if it was a music opportunity, I said yes. I was going to music school, or music business school. I was recording at our house. If somebody needed a drummer, I was playing weddings. I would go play, and I would just say yes. Like, do you want me to show up? I'd throw my
That's
drums
why
in
you're
my
sitting
car.
here right
Right.
now.
Totally just said
That's
yes.
how you build those 10,000 hours so much fast. Like, you started building that when you were like a child, it seems like. So you get,
Dude, when I was 15, I played in this band called Tom Saunders and the Surfside Six, which was was like a traditional jazz, like trad jazz, which is what people kind of call Dixieland.
Okay.
And I played Tuesday through Saturday, 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. I did 5 sets a night, 5 nights a week. Everybody in the band, the youngest guy in the band was 56. I was 15. My mom drove me, dropped me off, and came and picked me up at 2 a.m. I went home and had to be at school at 7 a.m.
bro, that is like some shit right there, man.
Yeah,
That is,
I did that. So like 10,000 hours. I mean, I literally,
Yeah.
I would fall asleep playing sometimes. Like,
dude, that's cool.
but
Reminds me of. Do you know who Michael Shreve is?
Michael who?
Michael Shreve,
Michael Shreve, the guitar player?
20 years old. He was the second youngest person at Woodstock, and he was so young compared to these other guys playing with these legends.
Oh, he's a guitar
it just
player,
sounds
right?
Like a lot of,
Yeah. That's,
no. He was the drummer.
Oh,
He's
wow.
a drummer and percussionist, and when he was 19, he jammed with Santana.
Oh, yeah, man. Wow. Okay, cool. Yeah. So, I mean, Neil Sean was in that band, and he was 15 when he was playing with Santana.
That's
Yep.
crazy.
It was a young band. Yeah. But, so I was doing this in Chicago. We did this stuff with, just keep tripping over myself and having stuff end up happening. So we play with Steve-O. We tell Steve-O, hey, man, my partner has this studio in our place. We should write some songs. So he had a bunch of other songs. We started putting them all together, and we recorded those songs. And we were like, we should try and get a real record deal, not this 12-inch deal. He had like an attorney that worked at some, Sidley and Austin, big, corporate law firm in Chicago. And, he was just passionate about music, so he had a couple of music clients and didn't really have an entertainment practice. But, was just kind of representing him and got him his 12-inch deal. And so we wrote these songs, or he wrote all the songs. And then I ended up learning in my class that, I should write a song. And so I kind of just faked these chords on a piano, like that my partner showed me, and then Steve-O took the music and wrote a song to it. So he and I collaborated on this song.
Nice.
So we sent this. We literally had cassettes, and we gave them to the attorney, and he sent them out to every record company in America, and every record company passed on it.
Oh, those bastards.
Yeah, no, rightly so. I listened to it recently. It blows. But, the weirdest thing is 2 years later, this is a true story. 2 years later, I get a phone call at my apartment. I'm living in Bucktown. I'm living in, across from St. Mary's Church, like on Hermitage. And I get a phone call from this guy. He's a manager. His name's Joey Gardner. He's like, hey, man. He's like, I'm Joey Gardner. I manage this band, TKA. We're signed to Tommy Boy Records. He said, we heard this song, and we're going to record it and put it on the album. And I was like, come on, who is this? You know, like I literally thought it was like, it's the first song I ever wrote. And I'm like, this is a crank call, you know? And he's like, how does that happen? Like, I'm not kidding. It was 2 years later. The band had broken up. And they're like, we're going to put this on the record. He said, but, you know, I really want to change the words. I want to own a piece of the copyright. So it was like a total bullshit music business move. But I didn't give a shit because I like this tune was dead to me, and I'm like,
did you sell it?
Take whatever you want, man. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, go ahead if you want to do that. I go send me. This is how much of it was like, you know, faking it. I was doing. I was like, yeah, you know, send me a contract tomorrow and a check for $2,000, and if it shows up, I'll do the deal.
Yes.
And are you connected to the royalties of that?
Yeah, and the next day is like. FedEx. I'm like, what?
2 G's in a contract.
2 G's in a contract. And so I split it with the guy that I did the deal with. And this guy literally changed 2 words. And, you know, why he did it is so that he could own a piece of the song that his band was putting out, which is kind of a bullshit move. But, you know, like I said, I didn't care. You know, it was like, you know, 80% of something is better than 100% of nothing thing.
I love that. Yeah. It's one in the hand is worth 2 in the... You know what I mean? If you don't have anything in the hand, you got nothing in the bush.
I mean... I heard this thing in the music business. They said, don't worry about your first contract. Worry about your second one.
Right.
You know? It's like, you do your first deal to get in the door, man. They all suck, you know?
That's what a lot of people are saying. And that's kind of what Web3 is trying to change, essentially, is like... And that's what we're trying to do with Sapo Studios is give
it's not what we're trying. We are
ownership to all of the intellectual property that you build when you build it. As soon as you build it, people can buy it.
I love that. And I'm a big fan, right? Because, quite frankly, the technology is changing faster than the legislation.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
There's a lot of legacy, especially in music. It's very complicated because in every piece of recorded music, there's 2 copyrights. There's the copyright of the song, and then there's the copyright of the recording. So it's twice as hard immediately. And so to navigate around that in a way that is fair and equitable to the creators is incredibly, incredibly important.
It's a necessity.
Yes.
It is.
Without the creation, you don't have anything. So those like people that are trying to dig in your pockets wouldn't have anything to dig for.
Absolutely.
Right? And like that's all they do.
I mean, we've all heard the stories of the old black musician that showed up and played the song, and then the guy that was in New York put his name on the label, and you know, when he's like, where are my royalties? They were like, here's a Cadillac, you know. That was
it's unbelievable.
Fucking the creators.
Totally.
Yeah. Bingus, I know you wanted to hop on this. What do you got to say?
Well, no, I was just going to ask because TKA is a Latin dance group. So that song that they purchased, was that particularly Latin sounding?
No, not at all. It was a ballad, and it ended up being like they're like it's the Tony, Kyle, and Angel. I think it's like the initials. They're like Puerto Rican, like New York, like Hammer pant wearing, they got the MC Hammer pants on and stuff, and I of course thought I was going to be Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, or Ellie Reed and Babyface at the time. I thought I was going to be a star and producer, but it ended up just whatever. But the manager owned a piece of the song, and so ended up on a greatest hits and sold a bunch of more copies, and it was really my foray into having a piece of work that I had actually be published,
right.
And at that time we didn't live in the world of self-publishing. It was hard to have, to get something released.
Did that help lead to you signing that production and publishing Blackwell over at Island Records?
Yeah, absolutely. That was 100%. So, my partner and I started writing songs, and we were doing everything that we could to get by. Like, he ended up taking his studio and moving it out of the apartment and putting it into, there was like a video production company that was doing industrial films, the guys that he knew, and you need audio when you're doing video. So he basically had the studio where he could layer in library music and sound effects and do voiceovers. Steel is good. Like literally, distributing VHSs to regional managers of, U.S. Steel or whatever, like that kind of shit. Just anything to work,
Right.
And at nighttime, we'd be smoking weed and writing music, and
As you should be.
Yeah, right. So we met this guy, Daryl Schwartz, and Daryl Schwartz had a friend named Marty Schwartz. They were not related, but Marty was the guy who got Tone Loc his record deal. He discovered Matt and Mike of the Dust Brothers, who have delicious vinyl. And they still make the pizza over there. They own, like, if you're over on Hollywood Boulevard and there's the guy eating the pizza, like that logo, that's their label. But they did Young MC, Bust a Move, and they did Tone Loc. And they did Brand New Heavies and a couple other bands or whatever. And so, but Tone Loc was a huge hit. And so we were like, well, what are labels looking for? And at that time, it was Debbie Gibson and Tiffany. And they're like, we want Mommy and Daddy's money. They're like, we're going to do like young pop girls. They're like, if you try and sell records to a young boy, there's a lot of competition. He's got to put gas in the car. He's trying to buy condoms, like he's buying beer. They're like, young girls. It's totally sexist statement at that time, but this was the logic that I was given to figure out what kind of project we were going to produce. And it was like, okay, I guess that makes sense. So we'll write a bunch of girly pop songs. So we wrote we wrote 3 songs. One's called One of a Kind. You can find that shit on YouTube too. It's like Jamie Loring. And she was like, Jewish girl from the North Shore who was like, I think it's JamieLoring. Like, you'll find her up there. That's it. All that stuff right there. Yep. Like, it's like terrible songs, Lover, Infatuation. You Don't Know What Love Is. That one, You Don't Know, is the first song that I wrote. It's absolutely awful. But, what happened.
We got to hear that.
Oh, God, yeah. See if you can play like You Don't Know What Love Is. And my partner wrote the lyrics of that as like making fun. It's if you went back to one page, I saw it. I think it was the third one. You Don't Know. There, yeah. And they took our album and they ended up remixing it as like a house music album.
Oh, this is cool.
Well, they made it cool. It was much cheesier when I produced it. But part of the thing was Marty Schwartz said, he was at a business meeting with the head of the label, and he said, how much money did I make you on Tone Loc? And the guy goes, $50 million. And he goes, I'm right again. And so we ended up getting a deal without, I'm not even sure they even heard the music, It was like, cool, you made us a bunch of money, you got a track record, let's give you a bunch more. So that's how I ended up getting that deal. And by the time that deal ended up, like, we turned in a record. The record was awful. We had no clue what we were really doing. They gave it to, by that time, Island Records had gotten sold to Polygram. And Chris Blackwell, the guy who signed us, who was a legend. I just read his book. He discovered Bob Marley and U2 and, Traffic. And I got signed by him and had no clue who he was at the time. I was a complete moron. But he had sold his company. And so this came up on his album, on the label called Smash. And I think his mindset was, I'm just going to try and create a Chicago house label. He had started, doing regional Jamaican records. He's like, I'll just do the same thing with the scene in Chicago. And so we were part of that. It tanked immediately, and I, split with my partner and woke up, broke, trying to figure out what the fuck I was going to do from there.
And then what'd you do?
Wow. And that's on to playing with Freddie Jones, right?
That's exactly right. So I in another turn of events.
Yeah, and now we slipped on a banana and fell into this one.
Totally slipped on a banana peel and fell into this band. So this guy I knew in Detroit who was a great drummer, a much better drummer than me. I'm thinking to myself, shit, what can I do? I can play drums. And I hadn't been playing drums because, on all this stuff, it was all programming. Right. So I maybe played a little bit of drums, but I kind of put the kit aside and was really just programming drum machines and stuff. And so I'm like, shit, I gotta go play some gigs, And And I called this guy, Will Leonard, who was in Detroit, had moved to Chicago, and he called me and said, hey, can you help me find some gigs? And I was like, yeah, call this guy, call this guy, call this guy. Because I was getting into doing the Jamie project and getting out of that stuff. And then when I woke up one day completely broke and couldn't pay my rent, I called up Will, and I was like, Will, do you have any gigs that I can do? And he said, yeah, as a matter of fact, his wife or girlfriend at the time they were moving back to Detroit, and he's like, I'm playing in this band called Freddie Jones Band. He's like, and actually, I think you're probably a better fit with the band than I am. And I was like, okay. He's like, okay, cool. So Thursday night, we're playing this place called Otis's. Come and show up, hang out. Third set, I'll let you sit in and play, and we'll see how it goes. And so I, sitting there having a couple beers or whatever, watching the band. Third set comes, and everybody's sufficiently buzzed and not really noticed that somebody swapped out the drummer. And I came and sat in and played a couple tunes. And I'll never forget Marty, who was the lead singer and guitar player, acoustic guitar player, turned to me and just goes, "Fuck yeah!" And I was like, "Okay." Cool.
Nailed it to the wall again.
And then I ended up, I'm not even sure. I think it was I kind of got called for some of the gigs initially because Will was transitioning out. And then, I was one of a couple of guys. And it was probably, they were more trying to figure out whether I was going to be, a fit or not. And I ended up being a fit. But part of it was that band had good business. They had incredible live audience. They had, they were playing 4 or 5 nights a week and, making a few $1,000 a night doing, Allman Brothers and Dead covers. And they had 4 or 5 original songs. And because I had experience in the music business, I was like, we should go to the studio and make a record. Because they were literally I think they were selling a 4-song cassette at that time. And, from my experience of having I was the only one that had any, real record company experience or whatever. And was I brought that to the table of the band. And we went to the studio that I found called Dr. Caw that was in the basement of this guy's house outside of Chicago. And we made this first album. And I think Will ended up playing on one of the songs. He played on this song called Stepping Stone because it was this fast shuffle groove. And I liked the way he played it better than I did. And I'm like, you should probably play that one, dude, because he did a better job than I did. I was like, shit, It was I hadn't played in a couple of years, so my chops weren't kind of where they were. And, it just made more sense to have him do it. Yeah.
I love that there's
drumming.
Go ahead.
Drumming is such a thing. Do you find that you have to do things to keep in shape to be able to play well?
Oh, 100%. It's really physical, and it's if you don't use it, you lose it, and I can lose it really quickly, especially now. I have to play every day. I keep a practice pad and sticks at my house, and even I'm put Westworld on or something, I'll have a metronome and play along with it just to keep my hands moving. But I've got because it's. You do get that 10,000 hours. I mean, when I was in the Freddie Jones Band, we were doing 250 shows a year,
That's
2 hours a night. And, man, I was playing all the time. I never had to think about it. I could just think of something and it would come out of my hands. And now I would be, trying to do stuff. I'm like, whoop, I don't have that lick in the tank today.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah. It was
how old were you at that time?
In my 20s, I was a little, I was probably 20. Well, what was it when I joined the band in 91? So I was 26 maybe.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
and then
sick.
We went from touring. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if that endurance and strength training for drumming just comes from the repetition of playing the drums like you're talking about, or if there's other things that you make sure that you have to do a certain amount of cardio each week because it's literally your whole body.
Yeah, it's funny. It's I don't know, man. I feel like I do the exercise and cardio and all that other stuff just to burn off energy. But at least I did back then. I would go run for like I'd go do sound check and then I'd go run for an hour and then go and play music just because I'm a hyper dude. You know, if you're sitting in this room, you see my feet twitching and I'm like wired with electricity or something. It's just kind of how I am. But what's really weird is that if I lift a bunch of weights, especially like upper body stuff, it's bizarre, man. I'll lose a lot of the finger dexterity of like I'll try and go do more intricate, like faster stuff with my hands. And, you know, your body like secretes lactic acid and it just kind of fuses all those small tendons together like in your hands. And so it's like you can it just depends on how you're playing, you know. I'm more of a feel player and delicate and fingers.
It's cool, man.
You know, than just like a basher, somebody who is like, you know.
Like you're not Travis Barker over here just smashing them.
But if you watch Travis, man, Travis has incredible fucking dexterity too. I mean, you could tell that guy grew up playing like marching drums, you know. Yeah. But there are guys that are just bashers, and I've never been that because I grew up playing jazz, and it was all about you know swing and feel. And it, you know, it's funny. We were just listening to Ozzy, and it's like there was a moment when all that shit became rock. Yeah. You know, and they lost the end roll part. So, but if you listen to like Black Sabbath or I mean any of those early rock, they're rock and roll. You know, which is like, you know, they all kind of swing a little bit. It's like, I always just say, the second that it went to rock is the moment that all the girls stopped showing up at the concert. Yeah. You know? Yes. You know, they're like, we can't fucking dance this shit.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Man.
It's true, right? I mean, they all went to concerts they could dance to, you know?
Yeah, I was looking forward to see you drum in the studio the other day. You were just kind of back there kind of like toying around. And I didn't even really know who you were or your backstory. I didn't even know you were the owner of GoldDiggers. I was just like, who's this guy behind the drum set?
Hey, man, play me something, brother.
Yeah, I kind of want to see what he's going to do.
Yeah, it's fun, man.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So you also own, I don't know if Bingus, if you're have ideas of moving forward, but I have a question as far as because I know you have a publishing company as well,
right?
So what led you to that? I mean, like obviously there's
another accident.
Okay, yes. I was going to say, was this a choice or was this like sort of stumbled into?
Well, it was a choice. He had to make 8 choices at some point.
Obviously, but was it like from your idea or was it something that like came across your desk?
It was. This is the entrepreneurial stuff, right? I was in Atlanta. I was working with Akon. I was one of the people involved in his record company. We had just done Convicted. I got fired from there. But what they had a deal with Universal Music, and they were signing a bunch of bands. They were recording, or artists, I'll say artists, not bands, because there was like a group called Red Dirt. They had Candy, who was from Escape. What was her band, Escape, who wrote like all the TLC songs. She's on like Real Housewives of Atlanta and stuff. She was signed to the label. And so there was a constant creation of music that was happening in the urban world. And by urban, I mean like hip-hop, R&B, rap, which ends up becoming pop music, right? So it was much... The trajectory of a rock band was there's 5 guys, they write 20 songs, they record 15, they put 12 on an album, and they get in a van for 2 years. And they try and sell that stuff, which is what I was just coming off of. And in the other world, it was more of a recorded medium. There were a bunch of bedroom producers. There was constant collaboration. There was complex collaborations that were happening. Like we were trying to make this Red Dirt album, and we must have recorded 100 songs. Like we were in the studio, we had locked out the studio. Every day a different producer would show up. There'd be a beat CD. They'd play 25 songs on a beat CD. And they'd be like, that one's cool. And then a writer would come in and be like, cool, let's write a song called Let's Get Missing. And then, you know, it was like this competitive environment of songwriting of how do we get a hit song. And it was really cool. I mean, it was incredible. But ultimately, I saw that what ended up on an album might not be the best songs. It may be that there was a quid pro quo with Justin Bieber's manager and he needed to have his artist, or, you know, this producer's hot, so we're going to put his song on, or there's too many songs like this on the radio, so we need something different. So there was all this stuff that lived on a hard drive, and I was like, wow, that'd be really interesting to find a way to market all that stuff. And I was dating a girl at the time. She worked at an ad agency, and the guy I worked for was this guy, Divine Stevens, who was, he wanted to be a rapper, but he was more of a packaged artist together. He could figure out, he was the guy who realized that Usher should be the new Michael Jackson. And he packaged TLC. And he packaged, all of these artists. I mean, Puffy, and he would do their choreography and where they could fit in the marketplace. And he's a genius at that stuff. And, he would do award shows and, have performances for these big artists. And I met him through Sierra because he would do all of her creative stuff originally and do a bunch of choreography because she's a great dancer. And so I thought, wow, if this guy, so my girlfriend had the Athlete's Foot was a brand named after a disease or an illness. But the guys that own Athlete's Foot, it's a franchise-based business. They realized that there were people that were going to one or two of their franchises where this guy was a young black man who could get cool gear. And it wasn't necessarily you're buying your technical running shoes, but you're buying the cool sneakers. Right. And they were like, wow, this is interesting. Maybe we'll create a separate standalone brand that's based off of this lifestyle. And so she's telling me about this. I was like, wow, man, we should really bring in Divine because he's a genius about, positioning artists in the marketplace. We can position this brand in that. And so we sit down in this meeting with the owners of Athlete's Foot, and one of the owners goes, right, so urban is pop and it's global. And I just went, what the fuck did you just say? Wow, you just boiled the ocean into, this word. And I had been around the world with Sierra and seen it. I'd go to France and there'd be a bunch of dudes that trying to look like they're from Atlanta and dance and and rap, and you'd see a bunch of rappers in Japan and Tokyo, and I'm like, this is weird, But when he said, urban is pop and it's global, I was like, holy shit. Yeah. So they were the initial talks were we're going to start this company or have a standalone franchise that we could sell that's basically urban gear. And the guy says, oh, and by the way, we're shooting these commercials. We're shooting a sneaker commercial. We're shooting whatever in a basketball spot. Do you know anybody who could be in the basketball spot? And so literally translates to, do you know any black people? And so we were like, yes, we can do that. Right? Seriously. Wow. And so we ended up casting this commercial for them. And when we did it, we saw it. We were like, well, let us see what it is. And they sent it back, and it was two things were evident. One was they didn't know how to cut sports. Yeah. It was like, oh, that guy, why are we shooting? He should be making the shot, not getting it blocked, shit like that, right. The dumbest stuff. And the second thing was that the music was terrible. And so they go find us some music. So I took a producer. I had the QuickTime file on my computer. I put the CD in there. I'd start the QuickTime, and I'd have the little mini player up so that I could see it while I was there's the QuickTime file, and play. That one doesn't work. Next song, play. That one works. I was like, oh, shit, that one works. Cool. Rip the MP3 because I knew the producer. And I was like, and I emailed them the song, and it made it to the commercial. And they paid us $2,000 for it. And I went to the producer, whose name is Kudala, who I'm still friends with, and I said, I gave him this check for $2,000. He goes, whoa. He goes, you sold my beat for $2,000? And I go, no, I licensed it. And he goes, what does that mean? I go, you own the beat and you got that check. And he goes, can we do this again?
You're like, yes, we can.
And I was like,
there's
wait,
an invention here.
There's a business.
Yeah.
And that's literally how I started the business. And then I did a terrible deal with BET. There was a show called Tears, Shears, and Beauty that was a reality show about barbers trying to make it to the Bronner Brothers hair show in Atlanta. It was like Real Housewives before Real Housewives. It was just the most shitty show. It was literally a barbershop show. Yeah. And we gave them music, and I realized I was pulling, they needed a lot of music, and I knew a lot of people with music, but I didn't own the music. and I didn't own the show. So I was basically like a tennis ball going back and forth in this negotiation. I'm like, this is fucked up. I can't really speak for these people. And by these people, I mean the owners of the music. And I can't really negotiate on their behalf, and I can't really sign any deals. So I'm like, I'm in the middle of doing all the work, but I don't have any upside. How do I solve that problem? And at that time, I met this guy who was his name's Michael Weeman, and he and I started the company together. He worked at BMI. He was like a writer publisher relations at BMI, and he had he had gone to law school and knew a lot about rights management. And I have a background in it and understand it, but he has a real in-depth understanding of it. And the two of us set up this, like, okay, how do we do this? And I total, again, back in the happenstance shit. I had played a gig with Freddie Jones. I had one of my own T-shirts on. I think I didn't have any laundry. I had a Freddie Jones shirt on. I went to the Starbucks on 6th Street in Peachtree, and I'm sitting there having a coffee, and this guy looks at me and goes, "Great fucking band." And I go, "Oh, yeah? Like, you know the band?" And he's like, "Oh, man, I love that band. I went to go see him in this one show," and I'm like, "Yeah? Cool." He's like, "Man, I saw him here, I saw him there, I went and did this, I did that, the other thing." I was like, "What's your favorite song?" He's like, "Wonder." And I'm like, "I wrote that song." And he's just like, "What?"
Yes.
And it like turns out he's a Chicago Kellogg MBA grad who is like business dude. And I was like, "Hey man, I've kind of got this idea for this music licensing company. I have no fucking idea what I'm doing of how to structure this business." He's like, "Okay, I'll help you." And so he ended up, him and this other guy ended up like listening to our business ideas. Like, this is the idea of what we want to do. And they got it right away. And they're like, "Well, you got to write a business plan." I'm like, "How do I not write a business plan?" Like I
hire a business manager.
Yeah, but I mean, quite frankly, I had to do the research and figure out if there was a business there. And I have to say this, that, there's an incredible book called The Art of the Start that was written by Guy Kawasaki that talks about how to pitch a startup and all of that stuff. And I learned so much from that book, but I learned so much from the process. If it wasn't for Michael, I would have never gotten it over the goal line, because I can't. I'm an illiterate musician, I mean, I can read and write music better than I can read and write English. So
right.
So without him, there would be no business. But we were able to go out and raise. We were looking to raise $500,000 to $1 million of a startup, and there was a little bit of a precedence. There was this company called Pump Audio that sold the Getty Images for $42 million.
Oh, shit.
So when we went into people, we were like pitching, like, okay, I mean, and we raised close to $300,000 in startup money, and we were supposed to get at least $500,000. But the 2008 housing collapse happened, and it was raising money from people in Chicago. Nobody in Atlanta would give us any money. They were like, "Y'all don't have any lumber yards, do you?" Well, my dad invested in Coca-Cola, like I knew Ted Turner. Like, there's a little bit of that going on down there. Like, we're in lumber down here, young man.
Yeah.
It was
bringing them poppy beats over here, boy.
Right. Yep. There's a little bit of that, but I raised all our money in Chicago. Actually, did sell a guy on a plane. I hope I'm not boring everybody with these stories, but I was literally flying to go play the Austin City Limits Music Festival with Freddie Jones, and I had enough Delta miles that I was sitting in first class, and I started talking to this guy next to me, and I start telling him about my idea. He's like, "Oh, I love music, man, REM, blah, blah, blah." He's like, "What's your idea?" And so I pitched him the idea of the company. I was just telling him the story. I was like, "This is what I'm doing. I think there's a real market here." And he gets off the plane. He goes, "Here's my business card. Send me a copy of the business plan." And I was like, "Okay." And so I just went off and played the gig. And when I got back, I literally sent this guy an NDA. He signed it. I sent him the business plan. He goes, let's go out for lunch next week. And I went out to lunch with him. He took my business plan. He throws it on the table, and he goes, you have 2 typos, and I'm in for $100,000.
Wow.
Let's fucking go, Simon.
And I was like, what?
Dude, see,
Wow.
Where are the typos? No.
That reminds me so much of ASAP over here, aka Shia Papoose, because like it's weird, like when you're in these situations, and you said say yes to these music opportunities, but it's like you said yes to just like pretty much every opportunity that was in front of you, and I think that's something that, if anything, I'm taking from this conversation is that just be open to the opportunity.
100%. Yeah. I mean, you never know where anything's going to lead you. I mean, I've gotten led down some pretty dark roads too, but but yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's one of the reasons that probably the entertainment and creative businesses are scary to parents. Why they're like, you should be an attorney. It's like because you know what the path is, right? You go to this school, and then you go get this degree, and then you go clerk for this dude, and then you
don't
go
have to talk to strangers on planes.
Yeah. So that path has like a very, if you follow these steps, then you can get there. And my kids are like. My oldest daughter is like, I've watched you struggle your whole fucking life. She's like, I'm going to work for a big company. You know what I mean? Like, she's like, cool. I would say that I'm either a shining example or a dire warning. Either way, I'm useful.
It is not for the faint of heart.
It's not, man.
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
gotta have some thick skin,
dude. I'm still, I've been broke my whole life, but I don't give a shit. That's not what ever drove me. It was like, cool, I get to play music, I get to do cool stuff.
I mean, it sounds like you've had a fucking dope life, man. Like,
it's been fun.
Had some cool shit going on,
Yeah, I didn't think it was dope while I was doing it, trying to figure out how to pay my rent, but
fair enough. But hey, you're here now.
Yeah,
we're here now
in this cool studio. I love it.
Yeah, the makeshift studio. All right, let's give Bingus a quick opportunity to either get into whatever he wants to get into, reset the room, or redirect us. Where you at, Bingus? It's just not coming through. All right, Bingus has been rugged officially, it looks like. All right, well, then I'll just do a quick reset. Yo, what's up? This is A-Bomb, a.k.a. Doc Froggle. We're hanging out in the studio today with a very special guest, Simon, hit me with the last name?
Horrocks,
yes. And I have Shia Papoose next to me over here, a.k.a. that is ASAP Froggy. We have Bingus over there helping us get down with the get down. He is actually not in the studio with us, so he's over there reporting live from Burbank, which we salute to the Burbs. But what we're doing today is talking about music creation, Web 3, Web 2, the journey of a musician, and as well trying to put more power into the hands of artists. We are operating under Notorious Frogs and their amazing team. Shout out to them and everything they do. And we're just here chopping it up today. So let's get into it. And what do you guys want to do next? You guys,
I want to say something about what you guys are moving towards and with a fix.
Let's do it.
My music licensing company. Part of what I was trying to do was absolutely that. I kind of got a little distracted with the business aspect of it, but essentially what I realized was that the opportunities for artists to be signed to major labels was completely eroding at that time in the 2000s. I mean, early 2000s there were less, like the bottom had fallen out of most rock music. Artists weren't getting signed. I was a manager before that, and I could sign an artist to a label deal and make a living doing that. And that went away because, at that point everybody was sharing music. It was LimeWire, it was Napster, all of that stuff. And people didn't know how to monetize music at that point. And so I figured rather than a B2C model, which was me selling you my CD, a B2B model made more sense for independent artists because, A, there's liability for a broadcaster to not clear music correctly. And before I started a fix, I used to manage the band Survivor. So the band Survivor has a little song called Eye of the Tiger.
Just a little song.
Yeah.
And I would do millions of dollars licensing that song a year.
Holy shit.
Because it had such a It's an iconic song. It has the association of Rocky.
It's timeless.
It's a totally timeless song. Anytime, whether even if it's used comedically or whatever, you know what it is. Like, you know, it can be used like as inspiration, or it can be used as like, you know, in the Starbucks commercial of right, you know, like that one. But it was. I could see the value of licensing music, and so in this new economy where, you know, an artist wasn't going to get a record deal or a publishing deal at that time unless they had track record, unless they had metrics or whatever, then it was going to be difficult. So I created a business that was essentially like an a la carte licensing arm for independent artists. The artists had a lot of tools to get to their audience. They could sell CDs at a show. They can go play a show. They could get it on iTunes. They could market directly through, you know, early days, you know, MySpace or whatever. They could find an audience that way. But, you know, so they don't necessarily know what it takes to license music commercially. Right. So, and I wanted to develop a system that I was told early on by some business people, you're never going to win because basically this one dude was like, you're never going to get the hip hop community to sign a contract. And they're like, this is a huge obstacle. And I was like, oh, okay. And I kind of looked at that as a challenge, you know, it's like, well, you know, at that time, you know, I mean, a lot of hip hop producers and stuff, you know, $100,000 for a track. Unless you had a check, you weren't going to get anything. So to try and convince somebody, hey, listen, you get to own your music, we're going to license it. And we created an agreement that was essentially a very specific thing. It was like, I'm not going to sell your record. I'm not going to put it on iTunes. I'm not going to bootleg your project. I'm just going to represent a very narrow band of rights of what it is, and that's commercial licensing. And you're going to grant me those rights, and if you want to take those rights back in a period of time, I have mechanisms in order to do that. Part of it was, I'm going to help you generate money, I'm going to help you generate exposure, and, you know, hopefully you end up having to get out of my deal with me because you've already got a bigger deal. Mm-hmm. And so I tried to create a system that was fair and equitable. I grew up as a writer. I grew up as a musician. I grew up as a manager, and like I was always on the artist side. So when I was involved in business stuff, I knew how I would want to be treated. Right. So I just did deals like that. Like, how do we go ahead and protect that relationship? Right. It's so important.
Wow, it's wild that you were doing that so long ago too.
You were like pre-Web 3.
Web 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like back in the early days of Web 2.
Yeah.
You had the mentality of what I think a lot of projects are moving towards now. And that's a big mission of ours as what we're doing with Frogland and Sapo Studios. And we were thinking of having a licensing platform as well. And that's kind of when I was at the studio with you.
Right.
I was like, you know, we have the tech people in Frogland. We have the idea people in our team. And what we're kind of missing is like this business aspect and like a business person and somebody kind of like who's in the music industry and has experience with that to sort of say, here's what you can and here's what you can't do to make it work. And I think your experience, man, is like directly like, that's why I was like, man, I would love to talk to you even off of this show. Like,
right.
I would love to tell you our business plan.
I would love it. I'm all about that. I'm all about it. I'm all about listening to new ideas. I'm available to give advice or whatever, or if I can be helpful to somebody. Like, I just really want to put people in a position to win. And quite frankly, I do that myself just kind of philosophically in a way to do it that I don't do it in a transactional way. If there's a way that we can do something together and make money. Like when we put GoldDiggers together, I literally put my friend Dave Trumfio together with my friend Dave Newport. And I was like, and if there's a role for me, cool. You know? And I end up running the fucking place, you know?
Tell us about GoldDiggers, man.
Yeah,
because that's
shill
an amazing
GoldDiggers
place.
heart.
That's an amazing place. I think the model there is amazing. I was blown away about
also
setup
the
that's
vibe.
there.
It's new Pangea. You know
It is very in line with Frogland's.
Well, what is
aesthetic.
it? The fly, dragonfly.
Dragonfly.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Club.
They have a digital, like an actual if you had I don't know if it is VR, but you have a space that you can go into and it's a bar and it has a vibe. They've done all like an amazing creation and
Dragonfly right down the street, right?
Yeah, right. No. This is actually a digital bar that they've built. But they and it's crazy how similar the vibes are at GoldDiggers to the actual space that they built in a digital realm. So very, very.
Oh wow, it looks cool, man! Look at that. That's killer.
Yeah. So they're all right. They do some stuff. Shout out to the Frog team.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like that's the stage. I don't know, like when it turns around, like that's like the stage you have there.
Wow, that's wild, man.
It's pretty weird, isn't it?
No, it's cool. I see the future of it, you know?
Well, it's again like one of those things that where now, because if you think about artists and even venues, how it's like, okay, well, you're talking sales and, you know, the capacity of how many people and yada, yada. You have to worry about a lot of elements with any live show. There's a lot that goes into that, as I'm sure you know. In a digital space, a VR space, a lot of these issues sort of go by the wayside because you don't need to worry about people's safety currently. You know what I mean? You don't need to worry about I was going to say, what's his name?
Travis Scott.
Yeah, that type of shit happening.
Right.
You can also appeal to a much larger audience within these spaces, given obviously the server capacity and what it can take. But at the end of the day, it's like we're opening a whole, and we have some ideas that will allow people that are IRL, that are diehard fans of an artist, that maybe would be like, I don't give a shit about the metaverse, but because they've either won or earned this token that gives them access to a VR concert now, and because they normally wouldn't give a shit if it's whoever, but now it's Harry Styles, and they're a diehard Harry Styles fan, they're like, okay, I got this free metaverse concert, I can cash it in anywhere, I can't fly to London to see Harry Styles at that concert, so I'll use that token here. And
it's incredible.
And we have ideas of how like people earn that, all these great stuff, but it's crazy what, like we were talking about earlier, how this tech gives opportunities and tools to individuals, because that's what I was hearing when you're talking about, you know, this licensing deal and this sort of this business plan you came up with. You're essentially trying to provide creators with tools to get to these next steps, and that's
100%.
That's the same thing. It's
sort of without the middleman.
Right.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean,
Like-
I looked at it. It was funny, man. It's just I kind of was on the when we started the company at that point. If you were a music licensing company, you were literally mailing CDs or hard drives to editing suites. The concept of being able to access that stuff through this is how crazy it was when we started that company. We were on MySQL Cisco servers that they like when we got our first business plan of how are we going to write software in order to do this whole business process. How are we going to handle all the asset management, rights management, and then delivery, and then e-commerce for what it was. And when we started looking at the first person that put together the specs for the website, paid him a few $1,000 to essentially create a spec sheet for what what it would look like online. I mean, the server bill was $30,000 a month, and it was like we only raised $280,000. So between legal fees, what we had done to develop the software, we would be out of business in a month. And we met this guy who was just like, well, what about AWS? And we're like, what's that? And he's like, the Amazon cloud. He's like, why don't you do it in the cloud? I'm like, what's the cloud? And he's like, okay. And he literally went home that night and built like the alpha version of the website in 20 minutes. And it was like, wait, it was so much faster. And it was this crazy setup to do that, you know. I mean, that wasn't that long ago. I was like 10 years ago when I launched the business, and you know, people weren't, you know. I mean, iTunes was still selling music. I mean, Spotify hadn't really even happened. I was using Mog, which ended up being bought by Jimmy Iovine and became, you know, Apple Music. You know, that was the first streaming service. Right, yeah. And Mog was great, actually. But, like, the ability to stream music at that time, Spotify didn't... I don't know what year they launched in America, but it wasn't, like... It's in this past 10 years. I mean, so to serve up music online like that, it was, in a B2B way, was something that was new. But as far as GoldDiggers goes, it was...
Yes, tell us about how this amazing place started.
Totally accidental. I moved to L.A. I was living in Atlanta, and I didn't love it there anymore, and I've always wanted to live in L.A. I mean, I've spent a lot of time here, and I had a relationship that was breaking up, and rather than be an asshole and blow up the relationship, and, you know, I was like, cool, well, let me figure out what my next move is, and did it in kind of a thoughtful way. And one of the options was I had a friend that had a place here in Long Beach, and I was just like, I'm thinking of moving to LA. He's like, get your ass out here now, dude. And he was the guy I met through the band, and I went and stayed with him. And when I got to LA, I just started hitting up people that I love. These are people all that I love that are my friends. And I was like, look, I'm going to move here, and if there's a business opportunity, let's do something. So one of those guys was Dave Newport, who is kind of the main driving force at GoldDiggers. He owns a bunch of bars in town. He has a hospitality business. I met him through the music business. His first bar was the Shortstop near Dodger Stadium. And he's expanded. He owns like 12 different bars in town. Awesome. And he's an incredible businessman, incredibly great man, incredibly kind human being, and does business in a way that's so ethical and just straight up stand-up dude. And so he had sold this business. It was El Chavo. That was like this piece of property that he owned, a piece of commercial property in Echo Park, and sold it for a pretty amazing profit. And GoldDiggers was sort of this strip club that had a hotel above it that had been vacant for 40 years. And it looks like a New York-style building. It's on Route 66. And so there was literally a Thai bikini bar that was not your charming strip club, like, let's go have some fun. It was like your life may have gone in a very horrible direction if you were in there. And then above it, you know, this place has been there since the 20s, so the liquor license is intact from Prohibition on. And so it's a 48 license in California. If you don't know what that is, it means you don't have to serve food. So you can just serve cocktails. And those are very, very lucrative and very, very difficult, because if you have the other kind of license, it means you have to have 65 or 70% of the income has to come from food, which is a whole nightmare. And so he has all his businesses are 48 licenses. Wow. And the hotel license was intact, which is another huge factor. And then the back was this giant soundstage. And at the time when we got it, we joked it was called the Rock and Roll Retirement Home, because there were literally people living back in there, and their rehearsal spaces. This guy Zoom was the dude that was managing it. He didn't have a lease. It was pretty grungy, pretty fucked up. And when I sat down with Dave, I said, well, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm looking at this piece of property. And he said, you know, it's got a hotel and a bar, and I know what to do with that. He said, but the back is this, you know, right now it's this rehearsal space. Maybe I'll partner with somebody. He's like kind of interested in getting back into music. And I was like, okay, cool. I was like, you know, he's like, I don't know, maybe I'll just turn it into creative office spaces. Maybe it'll be post-production. I don't know. I'm like, cool. Well, I'm going to move here. So if there's any, you know, we're friends, but if there's anything we can do business-wise, I would love to work with you. And he's like, okay. And just kind of like banked that. And then the next day I went and had lunch with Dave Trumfio that I met back in Chicago. And I said, what are you doing? He's like, well, I own a bunch of buildings on the east side of town, and what I've been doing is I've been building recording studios in them and renting them out monthly. And I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. He's like, yeah, you know, MGMT has a room, Butch Vig has a room, I've got some film composers. He's like, you know, that way, you know, somebody has got their house in the hills or whatever, and then they can have their workspace, right? And they can go and create and do that stuff. And they bring all their gear in, and I just have the shell. It's almost like a WeWork for musicians and producers and writers. And I was like, how's business? And he's like, I'm booked solid and there's a waiting list. And I was just like, do you ever need hotels? And he's like, yes, all the time. You know, we have artists that are coming in from out of town. And I was like, do you want to expand? And he's like, I do. I said, maybe. Mm-hmm. And I said, I think I have something for us. And so I set up a lunch a month later, and we sat down, and within 20 minutes, the response was, fuck it, let's do it. And we had one lunch together within 20 minutes. It turned out that Dave Trumfio's little brother knew Dave Newbert's little sister. They grew up outside of Chicago. They lived a mile apart from each other. Like, you know this person? Yeah, that was my blah, blah. Like, there was all this, like, shared connection that I had no idea existed. And I just put them together, and it was like a yes. You know, and fortunately, you know, I mean, Dave's an incredible businessman, so he was able to structure the deal of how to do it in a way that, like, we got to keep control of the whole thing. I mean, you know, he found a creative financing way to buy the building and then leverage the property itself with the construction loan, and then have a set of refinancing already structured when we got the certificate of occupancy. I mean, we ran into one period where we ran out of money in the studio for 6 months. I'm not going to say it was really fucking hard to get it done. I mean, we had to make a lot of decisions along the way. It took us from 2016 till 2019 to finally open the studio. It was 3 years of showing up without any money and staying in it, you know, and like, yeah, you know, I mean, it was definitely having a lot of faith. And then, you know, when we got the doors open, it's like, build it and they will come, you know, like literally, you know, like, booyah. Maybe the people will show up.
But you've had some pretty amazing people come through there.
Yeah, I mean,
one of which just played at the Forum.
Yeah.
And I was there.
Wait, who's that?
Leon Bridges.
Oh, Leon Bridges, yeah. We have Leon, we've had Lizzo, we had Camila Cabello, we have Rosalita in there. We've got, you know, tons of young artists that are, the studio has 9 studios, but 2 of those have been decommissioned. But we've got 7 studios in there, and there's, I mean, we could kill our artists in there all the time. You know, I had Travis Scott in there one day, and the same day I had Arlo Parks in the next room, and, you know, was mixing the Jack Johnson record in the next room. You know?
That's amazing, a very special place.
Yeah. And Slayer used to practice there, right?
Slayer practiced there.
Which I filmed their last show ever at the Forum.
Are you serious?
Yeah. They played 2 shows, and it was their last show. Man, the footage is unbelievable.
Wow.
People in the front row crying, like, just literally like an amazing moment, man, in history. And then, like, when I was standing in that room and you see their name spray painted on the wall, it's like, holy shit, this space has some iconic energy in it.
It does.
But you know what, man? Like, it comes from your energy, man.
It comes from Dave's energy. Honestly, I gotta say, man, Dave Newbert, man, he's got this ability to come in and update a space and really get into the details of how it looks and feels without essentially turning it into a TGI Fridays. You know, I mean,
man, the look and feel of the entire studio is amazing.
Oh yeah,
and the look and feel of the rooms that I saw online look.
The
awesome.
hotel's incredible.
I want to go there.
It's incredible.
I was telling my girlfriend, I was like, I'm going to go stay there.
We're going to hook you up with this vacation for sure, man.
Shia was showing me the photos. I was like, bro, just the vibe that you guys curated at this place. I haven't fucking been there, but like I can see it in the photos.
I'm
like,
an artist and being like, you know what? I'm going to go stay at the hotel. I'm going to go down to the studio, record, go grab a drink after I record, go to sleep, wake up, do the whole thing again.
Right.
Like this triangle effect.
It's almost like a camp for
you know what, man? Ricky Reed, who's this massive super producer guy, was the first guy that really saw what our vision was, and it was like proof of concept. He came in. He was the producer of Leon's album. He was, one of the masterminds behind, shepherding Lizzo's career, and works with a lot. Shawn Mendes. He produces a lot of stuff, but he came in and he had this vision. He's like, Leon is an artist who has who he is on an album and who he is as a person. He's like, he comes in the studio at 10, he leaves at 6, and then he goes on and lives his life. He's like, I need an immersive environment for him to kind of like live and perform and write in a way that gets him who he is as a person. It was almost like I felt like the way that he approached it as producing that album was like a director of, he was, you know, trying to create that, you know, cohesive environment for the artist and capture it. And so the last album ended up being called GoldDiggers Sound because they felt that it was such an integral part of the process of making the album.
It's fucking
It's
awesome.
so cool.
Well, it really goes to show, like, the devil's in the details. And if you do, like, as you said, like a director, kind of like setting up the environment so that you as the creative can almost be submersed and, like, it almost be impossible to deny the feeling, you know what I mean, of the
100%.
vibes that are there. It's just, that's a really, really wise thing to do. It reminds me of a Spielberg move where he plays certain types of music on set to sort of induce, you know, a vibe, if you will. And it's just same concept where you're trying to really give the artist the best opportunity to create the best they can. It's funny because I'm an actor and I talk about auditions all the time, and sometimes, like, they set you up for, like, probably the worst possible situation. Like the reader's, like, reading flat with you, not giving you any emotion. So it's like you
Tommy, I love what you've done.
Right. And it's just one of those things where when you take notice that, like, to get the best from creatives, you want to curate the space where they themselves can feel comfortable, vulnerable, and just do the work. So it sounds like you guys have done an amazing job.
I mean, I heard this quote the other day, and I'll probably butcher it, but it was like, if you want something to touch your heart, something that touches your heart has to come from a heart, you know? And I was like, I butchered it, but I really get that, you know? And what you were just saying is a perfect example of that. If you want to be able to have an emotional response out of your audience, it's got to come from a genuine emotional place.
It has to. Every action is from a reaction.
Right.
A reaction comes from an initial action. So yeah, you have to enact some sort of, I don't know what the word is,
passion or whatever. Yeah,
like it's got to come from a real place.
Exactly.
Authenticity,
because,
whatever.
I like how you compared it to TGI Fridays too, because, like, there are those studios that exist. You know what I mean? 100%. That are very like,
There's
here
the
you go.
bars that exist. They're in every fucking airport.
Right? Yeah.
It's, man, like what? And just the thing that you have there is amazing. And I was very inspired to see what was happening and inspired by you, because there's also the performance stage, right? So you go there, you record.
So kind of like to tie into what you guys were just talking about with the space that you were showing me, an online virtual world, and probably one of the reasons I'm sitting here is just because you started telling me about the things that you were doing with Web3. And, you know, one of the things that we have that we found out a lot during the pandemic, I mean, my philosophy during the pandemic was the only way out is through. And so rather than sitting home and binge watching stuff, I was like, we started showing up and trying to do some mock sessions and tried to keep busy. Some days we would just literally, you know, do one thing and go home, you know. And I was like, I don't care what we do. We're putting our shoulder against the rock for 10. If it's 10 minutes, it's better than nothing, you know? Right. And so from that, we ended up doing live streams. Like, live streams became the lifeblood of a bunch of artists. And there were a number of different startups that came up around that and different ways to do it. Are they truly live stream? Are they basically recorded performances? How do you do all that stuff? Do you sell tickets? Do you, like, whatever it is? And so, you know, we got approached by this company and we ended up doing some of them for artists directly. And then I thought we should have at least some house infrastructure here, even if it's not, you know, it's never going to be state of the art, because every single visual person that I know has their own preferred method, what cameras they're using, what they like. And if they're going to be that detailed, then they're going to bring their own shit in. So we should have something that if somebody had no budget, that we could do it. We could switch. We could do stuff live. We could capture it. So I built this system, And, you know, it looks like a little bit like NFL porn in some ways. It's kind of terrible. But, you know, part of it was how do you know, like robotic cameras, right? Like, because maybe you want to limit the amount of people that could be in the room at that time, early days of the pandemic.
COVID, yeah.
So,
Right.
But from that, we ended up developing a television network. Somebody came to us and had this Otera system where they white labeled the construction of, you know, device-based networks onto television. They're like, look, every live stream is in a prisoner on a website. They're like, well, how about if we could get that to a TV? And I was like, that's cool. So we ended up with GDTV out of this thing, and part of the limitations that we have is we're a tiny fucking room. There are 120 people.
Right.
I can't put a shit ton of people in there.
Right.
But when it comes to
VR
the metaverse
or
and
live streaming,
How you doing?
Yeah, right.
exactly,
See,
and that's kind of when I think that perked up your head because you're like, I don't
100%.
see the point of music NFTs, and I was kind of like, one, ownership not getting screwed over, two,
access
the
to
metaverse and visual experiences.
Right. I mean, and part of our conversation was, you know, I didn't really understand NFT as it related to music because the business model of music is making copies, right? You want to replicate and make copies, and NFT ownership is exclusivity of owning like one.
We're not live right now.
No, we're not.
So we can say, and like, we don't have to put this in the.
So yeah,
show,
I'll pitch you right now. Then you want to know how you
Right,
do that?
yeah.
Fractionalization of an album.
And that's what he was talking
Yeah.
about. And
So if you do that, and it's just very basic. It's crazy how this all clicked for me. I was talking to one of my acting coaches, and I was like, "How would you do this for a movie?" And he's like, "Fractionalize it." And I was like, "Holy fucking shit!" So essentially, you create an album. You take 25% of that album's total worth and royalties and etc., and you allocate that to this NFT project that has, let's say, 100 or 10,000 collection pieces. Meaning, if you were an X
Let's
individual,
say I went and bought all 100
of those
the
NFTs, he would now own 25% of that total
Right.
album. Now, what's interesting about this is Raoul Paul is a macro investor in cryptocurrency that I did a lot of research on and follow him. Very intelligent person. His example of this is culture. There's all different types of culture that exist, obviously, and one of the main things is about tokenizing culture. So how they do that is, like, think about if you're in New York in the early 90s and you hear Nirvana at a fucking bar, and they have, because this is what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. These bands will already have a fucking NFT connected to this album. So if you're in a dive bar and you hear Nirvana for the first time and you're like, holy shit, they have a QR code. You see their NFT is $20 for one of these NFTs, which is a small fraction of this album. You fucking buy that, and you bought it because you love them,
Yeah, it's
not
like-
because you saw it as an investment. But this is where you start speaking the language I call the love language of investors is fucking
Right.
money. So how do I incentivize equally a fan and an investor? By fractionalizing the album.
Well, I'll say this as somebody who's raised money for a company. You know, everybody that told me that gave me money was like, we're investing in you, not the company.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, that was, you know, they're like, if you don't have your shit together and we don't see that there's a potential of return, then we're not going to invest. But essentially, it was taking a flyer on who thinking that we were going to be able to make something happen.
Right.
with
You
it.
have to be able to execute. You can have the greatest
Right.
fucking game plan on the planet, but if you don't show up to the game, you're probably not going to win.
Well, the other thing is that there's so many obstacles in the way that if you don't have the perseverance to get through those obstacles,
Right.
then, you know, what the fuck are we doing, you know?
Right, precisely. You have to be able to take adversity head on and continue in that.
You
those
can't
journeys.
give up on it, you know? I mean, I actually just bought back 42% of my company from my original sweat equity partners, and I did it with federal money that was available through the pandemic. I ended
wow.
up taking a
Smart
loan and was
move.
just like, yeah, man, I was like,
I'm taking my company back.
I want to, you know, I don't know what's going to happen with it, but I know that I have, you know, my partner that is still my friend. We did have a bit of a falling out. He decided to not work on the company, but continued his ownership in the company. And I felt, from my perspective, that I didn't think it was fair. And from his perspective, he felt like, look, I've invested in this. We have an agreement that says that I owe this much. You can't just remove me from that.
Right.
So what is it? So I came up with a way to buy him out. and now we get to be friends again. You know,
There you go. Yeah.
So
Win-win.
Yeah, I'm trying. That's what I'm trying to do. I mean, it's not as much money as he probably wanted, but you know, it's as much money as that we thought that it was that we
Made
could
sense
get
for both of you.
Yeah, I think so. And it was like, look, if you want to get out, cool. If you can say no to the deal, but for me, it's like now I've got a path forward.
Yeah, that's the thing too about a lot of these, I guess, concepts that are being birthed in Web3 is kind of what you're saying. It's great to have the idea, but you have to fucking show up and you have to actually like execute. That's one of the things that like with this team, Frogland specifically, we have all of the insight as far as like the amount of money we need to garner, all of these because of this team that we've had the pleasure of relying on.
Literally, I was telling you about like the
100%.
flagship
Ed
Sony
Mason,
team. Like, man, they're just
he's a
the
fucking
fact that I had this idea in 2020 during the pandemic when I kind of started learning about NFTs and the metaverse, and I had eaten mushrooms and was like making a music video pitch deck for Chanel West Coast, and I was like, holy shit, like wearables that are released as NFTs in the music video, they're then connected to experiences in the metaverse, and like that's your token that leads to this whole concept. And I met with people
That's a really cool idea.
Yo,
dude, I met with people from the labels.
Wow.
And literally they were like in the first
Merch is the token.
Dude,
Fuck. Wow.
Yes, merch is the token.
So-
and like, dude, in 2021 I sat there with people that worked for all the major labels, and he's like, in the first 3 minutes I lost him. Frogland was the first team of people that were like,
Got it.
Continue. Please continue. Like what are we talking about here, and who are you guys?
Right.
And now, like I was telling you at the studio, like we need that business person to sit down and talk to say, hey, dude, here's this idea. We got these tech people that'll build it. We're looking for money people, and I'm admitting it. I'm not a fucking business person.
Yeah, no.
Right.
No.
I wasn't going into my first venture like that, and I learned a lot by partnering up. I found, like I said, these two guys, they were sweat equity guys. They had MBAs. They knew how to help kind of structure what it would look like.
Right.
And fortunately, the attorney that we had has a strong entertainment practice and understands transactional law from a music business perspective and entertainment perspective, but he also has a very strong corporate background. So he structured our company. But I got to tell you, man, the way that stuff is structured now compared to the way it was, it's so much easier.
Right.
I mean, there's this ability, these like, these transferable notes, of how you can, the system for investing in an angel investor into a startup is a lot different than it was when I did it 10 years ago. I mean, they're so easy now.
What is the thing Ed gave us? The frame or the there's a
it's like
safe.
Yeah, it's the safe agreement. Yeah. Like
the fucking Silicon Valley folk,
that
bro.
thing right there has changed everything because we just invested in myself and my partners invested in this company called Audigo that is like essentially it's like a GoPro audio recorder.
Nice. That's
and
sick.
yeah, and it's got stuff inside it, and it connects to the web, and it's like got this whole community thing. It's a startup guy. A guy was an engineer at Tesla, and a couple other people
smart.
that were he's a young dude, and he's like, I love music, and this is how I want to do it. So
Wow.
I have no idea what the fuck it's going to do, but we invested $50,000 in it. We used the safe agreement that is
Right.
That's a totally different, easy way to raise money. Now that when we did it, we had to have a subscription agreement. How many
so much
shares? And all,
bullshit.
it was a ridiculous
Well,
deck.
what's fun about this space too, because like the Harry Styles thing, since we're not fucking out
Yeah.
there anymore. So how you get somebody from?
So I do have to cut this short in a couple minutes
Yeah.
because I do have to go to another shoot.
Yes. So just really quick, the IRL. Like, say you have somebody waiting in line to get into the fucking concert. If they pull up the game, Sapo Studios or Frogland, and they're in there playing, and they earn frog tokens. Well, you can now go into this venue and you can trade X amount of tokens for either merch, food, or other items.
I love it.
On top of that, if you are in this, we may do a daily, every concert giveaway. Where now, if you're IRL and you get picked because you played the game, and we can just randomize, pick somebody, you win the Metaverse concert ticket pass that you can cash in anywhere.
And then when you go in the Metaverse and you have the experience of the Metaverse, you can play a game there.
And
maybe
win
you
the
earn
token
tokens,
to
and
the
then it cycles
real
you back
life,
to their tour
the real life concert ticket.
So, and I
It's
don't
fucking crazy.
I don't know a lot about this, but I've just watched a lot of behavior. So when I would go to a concert, I would always go to a concert with people that I knew. My daughter goes to concerts by herself,
Right.
And she has developed relationships with other people that go to those concerts that are fans with that group that she's developed relationships with. And I can imagine that this setup, doing it in a virtual sense,
100%.
They'll be
will,
meeting up.
will
like, hey,
foster
go-
all of that.
I already have.
We'll go meet up
friends
at the
that
bar.
that I've met just from NFTs, Web3.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Literally, like garnered relationships, and then you meet them in person. You're like, oh my god. Like,
Well, that's
how
the
do you
thing,
think
too.
That's really cool.
It's crazy.
The Metaverse and the other side, they did a launch, a test launch, like a beta test, and all these people that were from a specific community that we're a part of, they're like, oh, we're all over here. Let's meet up over here. And then they went about, going and venturing
exploring together.
Yeah.
But the other thing about what my vision was like community-based music, right?
100%.
And then if it was like, if we're talking about fractionalizing album, and we're talking about like the metaverse existing and needing to like warp people into the metaverse, or like
Right.
bring people in the metaverse, but also, so like that's where I was like, holy shit, in real life music studio that's rigged with cameras that can like, people can watch what's happening in the studio as they're Leon Bridges, if he's open to it,
Right.
he just knows that the cameras are on. He's going to go do his thing. And then as those people are watching, there's going to be a certain window of time where it opens up that the album's opportunity to be fractionalized
Right.
can be bought.
Live minting.
Live
auction minting.
Man, I got to tell you, one of the ideas, because we have so many studios, that one of the ideas was to permanently outfit studios with cameras that allowed a feed to go
Into
to
the
essentially
metaverse.
feed and allow and the only, if you wanted to come in and say record for free or something, then this would be a way to do that where we could actually broadcast the
and
experience.
actually make some, and you got off a subscription base.
And that's where I was thinking, like, man, like, there's
I
a lot
think
of
I have
aligned.
I think I have an artist that we could do this with.
Yeah, this is.
And
That's kind of a
good.
big deal.
We're
Yeah,
moving with
bro.
proof of stake,
Holy shit.
proof of concept with these
Holy
things,
shit.
and that's what he's said from the get go. He's like, we just need the right. You take it. Tell-
Yeah, we
tell
just
him.
need the right people to hear it. We need the
Right.
right artist, and we need the right proof of concept. And then we take that video.
You told him about the market.
the element, yeah, dude. Like,
There's so
there's
many-
a
there's
whole
so many
it's
elements
a
here.
massive. This is a massive fucking concept that we have that we've been thinking about for the last 2 years, and I don't think it's all can be explained in this one single conversation. And I do want to sit down with Bingus as
We
well.
should sit down and have a
And-
business conversation
Yeah, I would
after
love
this.
to, man.
Yeah,
I would love to, and also
I
get
think we can-
Frogland on the
because
phone.
I have two projects right now that I'm thinking of. One is an unheard of artist that this may be interesting for, and the other one is a known artist that is switching lanes. I'll tell you guys off the air about it a little bit, but it could be a great opportunity.
Well, and the fact that
a test case, we could figure it out.
with what he just showed you with that bar, the
Yeah.
dragonfly thing. We can talk to these developers. Like, these are very
They
skilled
made
developers.
They made that in 90 days.
They made that. So imagine us being like, okay, is there any way for us to actually live stream? And whether it's a frog or them themselves, it'd probably be easier it's a frog because they've already figured out the graphics of that and making them a 3D.
I think they can do it.
But I'm just saying, like, if we did an actual live stream into a metaverse and showing that, because that's one of the things too. Like, we have a funding amount that we need to reach to properly build out this marketplace. We have the time date that it'll take, and really what we need is what Shai over here is saying is we need the business person to help confirm whether or not what we're doing is correct, because that's really
Right.
the most important thing. We don't want to be like, okay,
How
we're
to
doing
structure it, how to scale it, how to like make sure we have all the pieces
Precisely.
we need. Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's an amazing.
let's corner this. I know you have to get going, so
Yeah.
let's end this here.
We truly appreciate.
Bro.
Dude, I
I'm
appreciate it.
appreciative for
Your
meeting
fucking
you.
story is awesome,
Yeah,
my
dude.
man. I love
Thanks,
that you
man.
just you take
In all
hits
honesty,
and keep going.
In all honesty, man, it sounds like there's a film here that needs to be made. I don't know if anyone's ever told you that.
I'm trying to write a book.
but
I
it's like
mean,
there's a great music story here, man.
Yeah, I actually have a title that came out of my band, and it's just funny. I mean, part of the joke was when we were in Freddie Jones' band, we would be touring around the country, and we'd go hang out, like go to Austin, and we'd been going to Austin every 6 months, so we have friends in town, and we go hang out at their house, and sitting there at a barbecue and with their friends, we'd get invited to it, and they'd be like, "Oh, my friend Simon here," and I'd go with Marty. Marty and me would go to this barbecue, and they'd go, "Well,
Marty Schwartz, right?
Yeah, no, this is a different Marty, but
damn
he
it.
said, "Oh, they're in a band, this really famous band that we love," and they're like, "Oh yeah, really? What's the name of your band?" It's like Freddie Jones Band. It's like, never heard of you, and so we start. It happened so many times because nobody knew who the fuck we were. It was like, "Hi, we're in the Freddie Jones Band. Perhaps you've never heard of us." And so it was like, "Hey, perhaps you've never heard of us." And I was like, "God, perhaps you've never heard of me is what I'm going to title this
I
book."
like that.
You know,
I like
so
that.
because it's like,
so good.
here's all my stories from somebody you don't know who the fuck they are, and
But
probably don't care about.
But you know all the people in the stories that you're.
100%.
Yes. Oh man,
That's pretty amazing, man. And I'm
I'm
very,
like Zelig or like Forrest Gump. I'm
Yeah.
in the room with
Yeah,
all those
yeah.
dudes.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful to have been in the room with you, man, and then thankful that you were open to chop it up with me. And
I'll do this
come on our
anytime,
show,
man.
Yeah.
Anytime,
So we
I'm
appreciate
available.
that very much.
Yeah, this was a very special show. I feel like, and it's gonna be a lot of fun talking more with you guys.
Much love, man.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, Sapo Studios over and out.
Yeah. Turn me up. I'm on rapid.